Did you know that nearly 1 in 3 travelers still don't know if their ID is TSA approved? That's right, over 30% of people could be walking straight into airport security with the wrong identification. And with SA's new ID rules now in full effect, that could mean missing your flight or being stuck in a frustrating delay. In 2025, these rules are more important than ever, and not knowing them could cost you valuable time. But don't worry, we've got you covered. In this video, we'll break down everything you need to know about SA's new ID requirements. From Real IDs to passports, we'll explain the differences, bust myths, and share strategies for making sure your ID passes the test. Stick around, and by the end, you'll have the peace of mind to breeze through airport security without a hitch. Ready to travel stress-free? Let's dive in. Chapter 1. Unlocking SA's secret. What you need to know about new ID rules. Traveling can be stressful, but SA's new ID rules are here to make things easier, if you're prepared. In 2025, the TSA rolled out tighter regulations for identification checks, and it's important to stay ahead of the game. If you're planning a flight, knowing these new requirements can save you time and trouble. The biggest change? The introduction of the Real ID, a special driver's license or ID card that's now necessary for airport security. According to TSA data, about 33% of US adults still haven't switched to a Real ID, which could cause delays at the airport. Travelers who haven't updated their IDs may face issues at security, so don't wait until the last minute. Now, what makes the Real ID different from your regular driver's license? Well, it's designed with added security features to reduce identity theft and fraud. This new ID has a star at the top right corner, making it easy to spot. Without this star, you may not be able to board domestic flights starting in 2025. The TSA has been pushing for these changes for years, and now, the deadline is here. For passengers without a Real ID, fear not, you can still use your passport for air travel. However, if you're flying internationally, a passport is non-negotiable. Remember, the TSA will check your ID before you even step through the security gates. So, make sure it's up to date and meets the new requirements. If not, you may find yourself running back to the ticket counter to fix the issue. Don't just rely on your memory, plan ahead. The TSA recommends checking your ID well before your trip to avoid any unexpected surprises. Traveling in 2025 means being on top of your ID game, because nothing will slow you down like an expired or invalid ID. Make sure your ID has the Real ID star or, better yet, grab that passport if you're unsure. Chapter 2. No more surprises. How to ensure your ID is TSA ready. You're packed, your flight's in a few hours, and everything's set. But then you realize, you forgot to check your ID. This is where preparation can make or break your travel experience. According to a 2024 TSA survey, over 10% of travelers show up at the airport without the correct ID. That's a lot of unnecessary stress. So, let's talk about how to make sure your ID is TSA ready. Start by verifying if your ID is a Real ID. Check the top right corner of your driver's license for that little star. If it's missing, you won't be able to use it for airport security starting next year. Don't assume it's a Real ID just because it's a newer card. Many states have started issuing these only recently. It's a simple step that can save you from missing your flight. Next, check the expiration date. TSA recommends renewing your ID at least 6 months before it expires. This applies to both your driver's license and passport. In fact, 20% of passport holders forget to renew their documents, according to a study by the US Department of State. Don't be one of those travelers. If your passport is expiring soon, take care of it early. If you're not sure whether your driver's license meets SA's requirements, visit your state's DMV website. Many states offer online tools to help you determine if your ID qualifies as a Real ID. It's a quick way to find out and avoid surprises at the security checkpoint. For travelers who still don't have a Real ID, consider upgrading your driver's license. It's often as simple as providing extra documents, like proof of residency, social security number, and a birth certificate. Your local DMV can guide you through the process. It might take a few days to get your new ID, so don't wait until the last minute. Start the process at least 2 months before your next trip. Chapter 3. Driver's License versus Passport. What's the TSA preferred choice? So, you're headed to the airport. Do you need your driver's license or passport? The answer depends on your destination, but understanding the sauce preferences can help you breeze through security. Here's the rundown. If you're traveling domestically, the TSA prefers a Real ID driver's license. It's simple, easy to carry, and perfect for short trips. But make sure it has that star symbol. Without it, you could face delays. However, according to TSA data, about 70% of passengers still don't know if their ID is a real ID or not. That's why it's essential to check before you leave. For international flights, though, the passport is the king. A passport is universally accepted, and it's your best bet for clearing TSA security, no matter where you're headed. Plus, it's essential for entering other countries. TSA recommends using your passport for any trip that requires crossing borders. In fact, the TSA suggests that even for domestic flights, having a passport on hand isn't a bad idea. While a Real ID driver's license is sufficient, a passport gives you more flexibility, especially in emergencies. And, if you're someone who travels often, carrying both a passport and a Real ID driver's license is a smart strategy. You'll never have to worry about which ID to use. What about minors? If you're flying with children, the rules are a bit different. Passengers under the age of 18 do not need a Real ID for airport security, according to TSA guidelines. But that doesn't mean you should skip checking their documents. Keep their passports or birth certificates handy if you're traveling internationally. Here's an interesting fact. Nearly 30% of US adults still don't own a passport, despite 74% of people traveling for leisure each year. If you're planning a trip abroad, it's worth investing in a passport as soon as possible. Not only will it be your ticket for TSA clearance, but it's also your key to a hassle-free adventure. In the end, whether you choose your driver's license or passport, understanding the sauce new rules is the key to making your airport experience stress-free. So, check your ID now, because your next adventure is just a flight away. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more tips on how to travel smarter and smoother. Chapter 4. TSA Screening Myths Busted. Clearing up the ID confusion. Airports can be full of confusion when it comes to IDs. With all the rules and regulations, it's easy to get caught up in myths about what's allowed. So, let's bust some common misconceptions and make sure you're traveling with the right expectations. One myth that gets tossed around is that expired IDs can still get you through TSA. Unfortunately, that's not true. TSA requires that your ID be current and valid to board a flight. In fact, 15% of travelers show up with expired IDs each year, leading to unnecessary delays and frustration. Don't fall into that trap. Always check your ID's expiration date before heading out. Another common myth is that you don't need to worry about your ID as long as you have a boarding pass. However, TSA security requires more than just your flight details. You must present an acceptable form of identification before passing through. Having a printed boarding pass won't do the trick unless you also have a valid ID. Even if you're flying within the US, this step is non-negotiable. There's also a belief that only passports are valid for international travel, which is partially true, but there are exceptions. Some countries allow you to travel with just a Real ID in certain situations. For example, Canada and Mexico may permit you to use a Real ID for land or sea travel. But once you're flying, your passport is essential. Always check the entry requirements for your destination country before you leave. A big question for many travelers is whether the TSA accepts digital IDs. While digital IDs are being tested in certain states, they're not yet universally accepted at TSA checkpoints. Until the technology becomes widespread, always bring your physical ID. TSA reports that nearly 40% of travelers mistakenly believe that digital IDs are already acceptable, leading to confusion at security. It's also crucial to clear up the idea that TSA agents are always consistent with ID checks. In reality, there's a system in place, but it's important to remember that the TSA is dealing with thousands of travelers every day. Occasionally, you might encounter an agent who requests additional verification. So, be patient and cooperative, it's for your safety. The final myth is that you can bypass TSA if you're not flying and only need to visit someone at the gate. TSA still requires a valid ID to get through security, even for those picking up loved ones. If you're not flying, you'll still need to show your ID to enter restricted areas. Remember, breaking these myths and understanding the reality of TSA regulations can make your travel much smoother. Clear up the confusion ahead of time so you can enjoy a stress-free journey. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more travel tips and advice. Chapter 5. Passport or Real ID? Here's what you're really carrying when it comes to TSA security. You've got two main options, your passport or a Real ID. But which one is truly the best choice? Understanding their differences and knowing when to use each can keep your airport experience seamless. First, let's talk about the Real ID. It's a driver's license or state-issued ID with enhanced security features. This includes a star in the top right corner, which signifies that the ID meets federal standards. If you're flying domestically, a Real ID can be your go-to identification. According to TSA data, 45% of travelers still don't know if their ID is a Real ID, so always double-check before your trip. The major benefit of a Real ID is convenience. It's lighter and easier to carry than a passport, and you don't have to worry about losing a bulky document. However, the Real ID only works for domestic flights. If you're leaving the country, you'll need your passport. A passport is your ticket to crossing borders, and it's recognized by every country around the world. A passport, on the other hand, offers more versatility. While a Real ID is enough for domestic flights, you'll need a passport to board international flights. In fact, approximately 28 million U.S. passports are issued each year. And with international travel on the rise, having a passport makes you ready for adventure. Interestingly, a passport is also a useful backup if you ever lose your driver's license. If you're stuck at the airport without a valid ID, a passport can help you clear security. This is especially useful when you're traveling abroad and may have trouble replacing a lost driver's license while in a foreign country. The TSA is clear about what they accept. They will only allow entry with a Real ID or a passport, so don't think you can slip through with something like a student ID or work badge. You'll need an official government-issued form of ID. In fact, 10% of travelers mistakenly bring the wrong form of ID, causing unnecessary delays. When deciding between the two, think about your travel plans. If you're flying domestically and you have a Real ID, that's often the easier option. But if you're venturing overseas, your passport is essential. It's not just for the airport, it's also required for entry into foreign countries. The best advice? Always have both a passport and a Real ID if you travel frequently. That way, you're ready for whatever your journey throws at you, whether it's a domestic flight or an international adventure. Be sure to subscribe for more travel tips and essential info for smooth travels. Chapter 6. What happens if you're denied? TSA's new ID fail-safe system. Picture this. You're at the TSA checkpoint, ready to board your flight, but then, your ID doesn't pass the test. It's a nightmare scenario, but don't panic just yet. TSA has a new fail-safe system in place to handle these situations and get you on your way. First, don't assume that a small mistake with your ID will automatically ground you. TSA officers are trained to handle discrepancies and can work with you to resolve issues. According to TSA, only about 1 in 1,000 travelers are denied boarding due to ID issues. However, it's important to act quickly. If you've forgotten your Real ID or it's expired, you can still fly with a passport, as long as it's valid. For those who don't have a passport, TSA may allow you to proceed with additional identity verification. This could include providing extra details like your social security number, address, and other identifying information. Be ready to cooperate fully. If you're stuck without any valid ID at all, TSA recommends contacting your airline or returning home to retrieve it. In extreme cases, the TSA may ask for additional identification verification through local authorities. This process can delay your flight, so it's better to avoid the situation by checking your ID ahead of time. Interestingly, TSA's new system also includes facial recognition technology at select airports. This is still in the testing phase but could help reduce errors when identifying travelers. In fact, Airports in cities like Atlanta and New York are already experimenting with this tech to improve security and streamline the screening process. If you're denied because of an invalid or missing ID, your best bet is to stay calm and respectful with TSA agents. They're there to ensure your safety, and cooperating with their instructions will likely result in a smoother resolution. To avoid these issues, always verify that your ID is valid and meets SOS requirements well before you leave for the airport. The fail-safe system is there to help, but it's best to ensure you're carrying the right identification from the start. In the end, while being denied boarding is inconvenient, SOS fail-safe process is designed to ensure that most issues are resolved quickly. With the right preparation, you can avoid this situation entirely and get back to enjoying your trip. Don't forget to subscribe for more tips on traveling smart and staying stress-free.